All right. I'm having a wonderful chat with Ukrainian-American pianist Sophia Agranovich. We're going to be talking about her 2018 Centaur release, the piano music of Frédéric Chopin and Franz Liszt. And as I said earlier, this is a program that I'm going to quiz you on because the program that you have assembled, we're talking about Chopin's Nocturne, the C minor Nocturne, Opus 48, number 1, the Polonaise Fantasie in A flat major, Opus 651, Franz Liszt, three sonatas that I don't think I've ever heard, based on Petrarch. Après en lecture du Dante, I hope I got close to that. Fantasia quasi sonata. That's the one I want to focus on, I hope, at some point in the conversation. And finally, wonderful, Enter the Hungarian Rhapsody, number 14 in F minor, although again, this one is interesting, the number 14. Very, very interesting. So this is a program that uniquely pairs these two composers. Earlier we were chatting about the similarities and dissimilarities of Chopin and Liszt. It's quite interesting. But first, Sophia Agranovich won the Ukrainian Young Artists competition at the age of 10. At 15, entered Juilliard. That's why she speaks English so well. I mean, you've been in the States pretty much pretty much since 15. Doctoral studies at Columbia University. In other words, you are New York City.
Yes, I physically live in New Jersey, but it's a tri-state area, let's say.
Okay. It's kind of like you know how Brooklyn has become so popular and famous now, but people I interview keep saying, well, let's call it New York City. In any
Yeah,
case.
I used to live in Brooklyn too,
Oh,
actually.
so
That's
you.
before I moved here. That's where I moved when we came from Ukraine. That's when we went to Brooklyn because I thought I entered Juilliard by accident into pre-college, but it wasn't an accident, it turned out. But
Wait a minute, you
but
can't
I
set me
moved
up
to
like that.
Brooklyn
What was the?
because it was in New York, close
Yeah.
to me.
Well, listen, you just set me up. What was the story about getting accepted to Juilliard at age 15? And
Yeah, I everybody said I had talent. I really enjoyed playing when I was little, but everybody said I should be a pianist. And it's a long story. I have a very famous teacher who knew Horowitz. She studied with Blumenfeld, and I won competition. But it always came very easy. And I always was interested in many things, like science, for example, ballet, art, everything. A lot of stuff. Still interested.
may I
So, but
congratulate you, by the way? May I just jump in and congratulate you because that's what I thought artists were supposed to be, interested in everything, history, dance, literature, theater. That's where I'm coming from in my life, and it sometimes disappoints me that I know good friends who are visual artists and they have no idea about the classical music repertoire and so on.
yeah, the problem is I'm also jumping. The problem is to do something good, you have to be concentrated
Yeah.
on one. And for example, when I practice before my concerts, in my mind, I become a piano machine. Otherwise, you're like programming yourself, basically. But you have to be interested in everything because it eventually shows in what you're producing. Anyway, so going back to the story, when we came to America, I came a long time ago. I'm not telling you my age, but it was a long.
Okay.
Uh, everybody said I should go to Juilliard, so and I didn't practice, so my father said, "Why don't you go to Juilliard?" I said, "Okay, I'll try audition." And they bought me a piano right away, and I practiced a little bit, and I passed the exam. And actually, Sasha Gradnitsky, very famous teacher at the time, he produced a lot of concert pianists now, and he took me into pre-college, and uh, I was the only one, and the other boy from Philippines whom he ever took from pre-college. I didn't understand the significance of it, and I just thought, oh, it's probably an accident, and I kept practicing. But that's the story. But then I stayed at Juilliard, and became a pianist.
Yes, and by the way,
For
but you
23 years too, but that's another story.
I'm sure there are millions of stories. And the other thing is, by the way, it is you are home free because you were 15 years old. And believe me, I remember when I was 15 years old and the things that were presented to me and people that were presented to me, and it was like, I couldn't have cared less. I was just totally preoccupied with my own navel. You know what I mean? I had no a clue about the opportunities that were, humming and bubbling around me. So, it's just being young and naive. And boy, I wish I were 15 again and could do the whole thing over again with the experience I have
In the
now.
next lifetime, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll
Well,
gain
listen,
experience.
being Ukrainian, is it fair or an insult or what? What I'm trying to get at is this. It's almost a cliche. This Russian style of playing. Am I there? Am I wrong? What about your training and how you? What is this Russian style of play? If you even
Russian
play.
style, whether it's Ukraine or Russia or even Georgia, or it's used to be a Soviet Union. I came from Soviet Union. When I came here officially, it was never Ukraine at the time. Um, but Russian style is basically European style, with Anton Rubinstein was the proponent of it, and the great Russian tradition actually was based in Ukraine too, like in Odessa, Stolarsky School, where Emil Gilil, Sviatoslav Richter, they're all from Stolarsky, from Odessa. So it's kind of, and Ukraine was always part of Russia. There was no such thing as Ukraine. It was a long, long time ago. It was like a state, like New Jersey, New York, like state in America. So I consider Ukrainian school is Russian school. Like Horowitz came also from Ukraine, from Kiev Conservatory. That's from Blumenfeld. That's where my teacher was studying, was Blumenfeld. And Professor Edelman, who was in Lvov, was also studying with him, whom I was taking lessons there. Sasha Gorodnitsky was studying with Joseph Levine, who was also from Russian schools. So there is a huge history. So I don't even know the difference between like German piano school or English piano and French. I think they have slight differences because, but basically the tradition is expressivity, singing tone, a lot of emotion, and polished technique. Everything should be in sync. Uh, uh, Everything is for expression. Like nothing is just pure technique, but technique should be perfect. And Russians are famous for their technique and power, and like, let's say, Rachmaninoff, his sound was probably the biggest in singing, and also virtuosity from all the Russian pianists, even modern Russian pianists, is usually taken for granted.
Well,
Because
I wanted to get to the bottom of that really very basic question. I'm sure it's not the first time you've been asked, mainly because I myself have kind of an idea of what I think. I'm a clarinetist conductor. What do I know from piano? But the point is, I think I have an idea, and I'm thinking of a specific piece on this CD that we'll be discussing. And to me, it's this huge, as well as all the expressivity that I have notes forever about, but this giant sound in the big moments. It's just a huge, huge sound, and I kind of think of that as sort of the Russian style, just very masculine, if you'll forgive me.
it's you're not the first one who told me this. I play a very masculine because those pieces demand it. I don't think it's feminine or masculine. Although Chopin was accused, so to say, by his critics that sometimes he played feminine, especially Beethoven sonatas. I read about this, but it's all relative. What is it? It's just femininity is just sensitivity, and masculinity is power. You should have both. The Russian technique is usually you play with your shoulders, you play with the whole body, you play with your weight, and it automatically gives you a lot of power. That's how Liszt played, although he wasn't Russian.
Close enough.
So
The Empire, the
I
Hungarian
try
Empire.
to I just play how I feel. I read a lot, and of course I study a lot. But when I play, I always as I always in a trance. First of all, it's very funny because I can practice only when I'm very tired and I can't sing. I practice always in my subconscious very late at night. And that's where I almost transposed, and you know, time is relative, so I feel like I'm just going back in time or forward in time when I do this, and I really feel composers there, like their soul around me, which is very difficult for me to do during day. So I have problem with day concerts a lot.
Hey, let me jump
Anyway,
in.
so
Let me jump in, please, because you have hit on something just now that is absolutely deep and profound, and also speaks to this CD. These pieces on this CD are this is one of the most profound assemblages of works by these two composers, I think, from my impression and the time I've spent with it. But you speak about what you're basically, I think, saying. Well, you said you are a sort of trance, like you need the peace and quiet and the trance and meditation sort of time, the quiet time, which to me speaks about the subconscious rising to the surface, you know? And
yes.
let's talk a little bit about these two composers. So similar, so dissimilar, and I'll let you go in here, but let me throw mine in. First of all, born 1 year apart, 1810, 1811, for Liszt. Liszt outlives Chopin by something 40 years or something. Dies in 1887. You know, practically saw automobiles. I mean, he almost lived that long. Liszt was a profligate and a playboy and had many lovers and blah, on and on and on, and was very extroverted. Stop me if I'm incorrect, by the way. You know, if I get out of line. But all of that stuff, and very much the big ego and the huge virtuoso. And I always think of Chopin as being very quiet, very retiring, just very what do you call it? Antisocial in many ways. Go.
Um, it's hard for us to judge because we didn't have recordings like this and we didn't have interviews. We just have some notes, and some of the notes are from critics and some of the notes are from their lovers. So we don't know how true to life they were, but just from the music and from the paintings and from the photographs, because we do have photographs of Liszt and Chopin, we can get the feeling from what they were like through just the feeling. Chopin, of course, he was introvert, and because of his sickness, his sound was very gentle but full of nuances. But even Liszt said that Chopin was a very hard man to understand. Like from the first set, like he had millions of, and I'm talking in my own words because I can't quote, I don't remember. He had millions of different feelings and expression, and it was like a snake that was going backwards onto itself. And he was probably, I feel that Chopin was very judgmental. He was very well schooled, very aristocrat, fully to the bone. And he was very critical, but very supportive of students and people whom he liked.
And he was also
And
very
this was,
self-critical, very self-critical, I
yeah,
think is how that comes in.
very,
But another thing, just let me jump in on this one. There you are. Chopin, the natural aristocrat, the Polish aristocrat, really, in every possible way, dying young of cystic fibrosis. I guess they've pretty much concluded these days, not just pneumonia, and there's Liszt, who apparently was always trying to lay claim to a great family, always wanting people to believe that he might have come from the great Liszt family in Hungary. The noble family. There's again, these opposite personalities. Excuse me for interrupting. I hope I didn't lose your chain
no,
of
you
thought.
I mean, it's okay because you have to interrupt me because each topic that we discuss can take hours in the interview, right? It's Liszt was extrovert, and I feel like Liszt was much more generous than Chopin. He was much more straightforward, and it's funny because I was telling my friends, it's crazy. Since childhood, when I loved Chopin, since when I play Chopin, I get physically sick. I have throat ache, physically sick, really, stuffed nose. I become like him, like his vibes get into me. And when I play program of Chopin pieces, I know I will get sick, so I have my tea ready already, everything, really. Because, you know, it's like material goes into emotion, and I mean it's interchangeable. So I'm reacting like so much to that, and Liszt always helps me whenever I'm sick and I have to play physically. Liszt, not listen. Chopin I like to listen to. Liszt I like physically play. I get healed. It's unbelievable. Liszt music has physical healing powers, and I feel he's so supportive, generous. Like he's like my best friend, basically. And he's accused by, and he does have, of course, show pieces and stuff, but it's not to put anybody down, like to say I'm the best. It's just from excessive life force, excessive love, I would say. And Chopin, I don't think Chopin was as nice as Liszt as a person, but he was more refined, and they complement each other so much. That's why I chose this CD, because both of them are very, very close to me. And when you play Liszt and Chopin together, in my concerts, it's very often I play them together besides other composers. They complement each other so well, and they were, of course, they were friends. Liszt was first biographer of Chopin. He introduced him to George Sand at the party. But
Chopin's
they
lover.
were rivals as well.
Chopin's
And
lover. Yeah, exactly. I wanted to make sure everybody understood it. We have a fairly musical oriented audience that will be watching this, but very, very interesting. The ties between these people and between the great artists of the Romantic period, all kinds of connections. Anyway, excuse me, but yeah, and I think you've got it right. I never thought of Chopin as being maybe not as friendly, but he was a very ill man, and thus more
but you know,
retiring.
right, but I think our thoughts and emotions do influence. I don't know. It influences each other. Emotion and thought influence physical health and physical. It's all part of one. And maybe his thoughts were influencing his health too, in a way. You know, Liszt was, I read a long time ago, that Liszt was a sickly young boy, and then he started exercising, and he got out of it, and he lived a long life. And also he was struggling. He was like, I think it's he who said that he was a Mephistopheles disguised as Abby or something. Yeah, because he has this dual personality. It's a Scorpio thing by astrology, but when you are, I mean, um, God and physical stuff very closely interact because it's the same energy, creative energy, uh, primordial creative energy. So it depends how you channel it. So one thing he would be into women and stuff, and then he goes back, what I'm doing, what is the purpose of life, and he started,
Becomes a priest.
became an abbey. So it was back and forth. Chopin didn't even go there.
Yeah.
I think Chopin was more into interaction between people, deciphering all of it, thinking how they think about him and who said what. He was a little more feminine, and but he was also he was full of love, and he had this internal power. For example, um, in Polonaise fantasy, his energy is so concentrated, and he's so heroic inside. He's on a par with Beethoven, and
Absolutely.
so with the it doesn't mean that when he played it wasn't too loud. It's internal strength that's he's like a warrior for truth or something,
Yeah,
or
and
and you.
let's stay on the Polonus for just a moment. I just went down to my notes. First of all, I mean, I'm overwhelmed listening to this music. This is this CD again has the strangest and the most fascinating combination of pieces. It just is an encyclopedia of the psyches of these people. By the way, speaking of channeling, hello, I'm looking at one. You just described earlier that you essentially channel composers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, let
and
me just stay on Polonaise Fantasie for a moment. I write, this mesmerizing opening, then these eccentricities of harmony and form, and his own quote. I loved this. You have it in your program notes. He himself, Chopin himself, said, "quote I'd like to finish something that I don't yet know what to call." So this is really this piece. Just dwell on it for just a moment here. This piece, this opus, what is it? The opus 61, A flat major, Polonaise Fantasie is a unique kind of form. He really lost himself. Speaking of meditation, in a new form.
yes, and it was, they call it, it was his last style. Chopin, it was the last style, and it was misunderstood by his contemporaries, even Liszt misunderstood Polonaise fantasy. Can you believe it?
What
He
did they
said,
misunderstand? What part of it did
yeah,
they not?
because it was so many different emotion and feelings, and it was
Uh,
incoherent even for Liszt, because he was so much beyond his usual. Can you believe it? If Chopin would live a longer life, he would probably write atonal music, like right, like last movement of the Funeral March Sonata. It's almost atonal.
and by the
It's
way, we're speaking of a man who could hear. We know someone else, Beethoven, who worked himself into the 20th and 21st century, if you get my drift, from his inner brain. But in this case, a conscious person experimenting. And Chopin, of all people, from my mind, the general public has an idea about the mazurkas and all of that, and also a kind of a happier impression, if you will, I think, generally, of the man. They don't realize that there were these terrible unhappinesses and illnesses underneath. I think the Polonaise fantasy is one of those. It's so complex and so personal, so intimate. Go ahead, sorry.
And at the same time, you feel the always in his music, like revolutionary, that you feel this pain for Poland. And his Chopin is a warrior inside. He's a warrior. It's like everybody knows this quote that Schumann said that it's cannons buried under flowers. His music, but inside he's very complicated man. So he's probably one of the most complicated music figures that I ever know, just listening to his music. Everybody had problems. You have to be complicated to write music like this. But he was so entangled inside. And always this pain for Poland. Like it's like you're a fighter and you're bound. You cannot do anything for different reasons. Including your health, or you cannot say he was aristocrat, he didn't want to offend people, and for different reasons. But this explosiveness is in him, and when I play his music, I feel he's even more explosive than Beethoven or Liszt inside.
I was
And
shocked. I was shocked. I don't. This is not played very often, is it? This particular, the Opus 61. Do you know? I mean,
um,
I'm talking as a conductor, so I'm a little.
right,
I have
it's not.
fear of. I don't think it's performed much. I don't. It was just a big shocker to me because it's so avant-garde, really, as per our conversation.
Right. I didn't hear many live performances of this. So, and I didn't hear many live performances of Dante Sonata either, probably because of its
Yeah.
difficult.
Or the
I
or the so or the sonatas. I've never heard the three sonatas that you chose. So what have we got here with this CD? Very unique repertoire. It's very seldom performed. And by the way, the big list piece, little wonder. One of my questions is how on earth did you survive that monstrous tone poem? I could literally see the muscles building on your biceps.
Well, I enjoy it because I'm very energetic by nature, or you can say, I mean, like I said, I'm interested in a lot of stuff, and to keep me sitting and practicing it, it has to be a difficult piece from one way or another. So that's why all my CDs, that's my CD number 7, they all have these virtuosic, very difficult pieces. Because otherwise I can't sit and practice. And I love Bach and I love Mozart, and I played almost all Mozart sonatas, and I play almost all Beethoven sonatas, and Haydn also. I love this, but I'm reserving it when because God's willing, I will live long life. When I will be old, I will start doing more Mozart and Bach and
You have
more
it.
calm.
You have it.
But
By the way,
I
you.
enjoy
Sorry.
I enjoy physical, I actually am trained, I'm yoga trained. I use, certified as yoga, Pilates, whatever. So because I enjoy movement. I always wanted to be a ballet dancer, by the way, but it never happened.
So let me jump in. I've got to jump in again, okay? Which is that I believe you can slap me around if I missed some of this, but you speak about being a young child and not wanting to practice, bored of practice. I think you indicated something like that. Hang on. And now, as an adult, as a professional musician, You're telling me you are bored unless you tackle the really big, challenging stuff. How close am I?
Yeah, it doesn't sound too distinguished, but that's 80% true. 80% true. Right now, it's interesting because as I get older, I actually enjoy playing slow, and I love second movements of sonatas. I do love Mozart, and especially when it's very, very, very late already, and I don't want to wake up any neighbors, although it's a house. Then I do all my slow, soft, Baroque music, and I really enjoy. I never could do it when I was a child. Always loved Mozart when I was a child, but I wanted to do. Actually, my mother, when I started taking piano lessons, I was so bored. I said, I don't want to do it anymore. So I stopped. And then when my teachers didn't come anymore, I learned on my own, like a lot of pieces, because he just, he moved me so slow. I couldn't take it. And then right away, somebody heard me in school. It's a long story. Anyway, and I progressed so fast after this.
Okay, well, I'm, what,
So even with my students, I understand, I love dealing with hard children who can't sit because they're so talented, and I move them very fast. And because I understand what they're going through. Sometimes they come in from different teachers, parents bring them because they're problem kids, but they're one of the most talented.
they're just bored, as you were,
They just,
you know. And by the way, as you apparently continue to be bored, because first you want to dance, and then maybe I'll write a novel. Oh, next week perhaps I'll paint a. And you and I said this earlier. This is how I feel about an artist. Artists need to be involved in every single aspect of our giant thing called the arts, literature. People, a classical musician who doesn't read literature, my meter of approval goes down, and so on. So you're just a fully engaged artist as in all aspects of your wide interest. You even mentioned science. I wish I'm
I love
hopeless at science.
science. I love, but the problem is there are only 24 hours in a day. That's I find it so I can't I can't come in terms with it.
Well, let's see. Where are we? Let's get. Come on. Let's get serious. Let's see. What have I
Yeah,
forgotten to ask you? I had some. Oh, here's another comparative thing that I find interesting about the two Chopin lists. Both, spent a great deal of time in Paris. But my impression is that Liszt took full advantage of his time in Paris, and Chopin, being again a retiring person, really he was not happy in Paris, whereas Liszt just embraced Paris. Am I close? Anything like that?
Yeah, Chopin would, you know what? Wouldn't be happy anywhere except in Poland, but he wouldn't live in Poland because probably there was no, not because of Russia, whatever. Probably there was no opportunity for musicians like in Paris. Actually, he wanted to be in Vienna. He went to Vienna, but he didn't have success there. And it's his nature. This is romanticism, quintessential romanticism, searching for something, unhappy. That's his nature.
Sort of.
Yeah, he wasn't happy, and he got sick there because the climate was not good. Liszt would be happy anywhere with his personality.
As long as he had several
He was
women
like a
around him.
sunlight. He would just illuminate everything.
And another thing I know most of us know this story, but speaking of Chopin and his longing for Poland, as we know, his last will was take my heart home.
Yeah.
Leave me here in Paris, but take my heart home. And they did. So, talk about the quintessential romantic. And I think, Liz, again, on your CD, what I find so fascinating about the two is how their personalities musically, in these excerpts that you've chosen, these pieces that you've chosen for the CD, both of them are revealing their deep subconscious, deep sub-basements, both Liszt and Chopin. And the sounds are very, very similar if you kind of get my drift. In other words, the moods of these two men in the deepest personal parts of their consciousness and subconsciousness, they both were having these same very sad experiences, or whatever it is, the melancholy of the romantic of that period, or whatever. Am I? What do come on, you're the PhD. Tell me if I'm close here.
Um, of course, actually, when I did CD, I usually what I do, every year I do try to do 90% or 100% completely new performing program, and I tried to record it just to make up for my lost years when I was my last life in programming, 23 years. So when I choose the program, it's logical, but it's also a feeling. So I just felt like playing those pieces and then say, oh my God, it matches perfectly on CD, because Chopin's C minor nocturne, it's like sonetti. There are also the nocturnes. And then Dante Sonata, it's quasi fantasia and Polonaise fantasy. So it matches perfectly. I just didn't have enough for, some joyous. So I took this Hungarian Rhapsody, and I took the longest, the most, I just love this Rhapsody because I held
the most sober
Yeah,
and
that's
introspective,
right.
really, of number 14, Hungarian Rhapsody. It threw me because, again, I think I'm now finally feeling comfortable in telling you that a lot of this repertoire I am pretty sure I have not heard, at least not heard often. So when I heard, for example, Après une lecture de Dante, that Fantasia, that was incredible. I'm sure I've heard that particular piece before, but again, the way you play it, it's like it's like a crossing the Alps or something. I mean, it is just this gigantic, monstrous novel, which is Liszt's style anyway. All the big tone poems that he composed and so on. But anyway, that's a beauty. But the Hungarian Rhapsody, that number 14, I was thinking, Hungarian Rhapsody, one of them, number 14, and then I mean the introduction even to number 14 is bizarre. I think one can say it's a very very interesting uh, number 14. So you're speaking, and I'll let you get in here, but this whole CD, quite correctly, you are encapsulating your feeling about these two composers, and you don't need a happy piece. You know what I mean? This is a very serious CD.
Yeah, but a Hungarian rap, I love Hungarian rhapsodies. They can be played like always. They can be played superficially, show offy, but there is such a depth of feeling, um, and there's so much variety in sound and those folk melodies. I just love them. I wish I could make recording of all the Hungarian. I play a lot. I played a lot of them, but I wish I could make recording of all of them. But I have so many plans for different recordings that would be not enough for my lifetime.
Okay, hello, let's
So
do that. Let's start right now because I'm starting to run out of time. Tell me what's going on next. There you are. We've had a great fun
next,
time. What's next?
next, I actually working on three full programs right now. The problem is I was going through some stuff last year, so I'm a little bit behind in my programs and recording, but concerts are coming up. So I have to record two old programs and I'm working on the new one. So I don't know when the next recording will come, and I hope maybe next year, maybe in 8 months, 9 months. But I'm working on three programs and three recordings simultaneously because that's how it happened. It's not like one every year as I did. And I mix and match the pieces so they fit the recording. So I don't know yet what it will be, but it will be probably Beethoven, maybe some Liszt, and maybe all Chopin CD2, and Debussy and Mendelssohn. That's what I'm working on.
And then when will you, what year do you think? 2024, 2028, you'll begin your
No,
Beethoven cycle?
even sonatas.
Or your Mozart cycle? I'm thinking because you hit
Well,
it.
what's the title when I will be 90? Which no, Beethoven. I don't know. I actually recorded some Beethoven. I love Beethoven sonatas. I recorded Waldstein. I recorded Appassionata, and I'm doing three more, which I plan to put on one CD. Maybe I played a lot. I played like 32 variations. I played rondos, but those are small pieces. So I have to mix and match again. But the problem is what's good for recording, it's not sometimes good for the performing program. And again, there are only 24 hours in a day, and I have a lot of students too. I teach.
Oh,
So
excuses. It's clear to me that you're that you're probably awake 24/7. And what I mean by that is you nod off for the evening and your subconscious comes bright to life and you memorize a couple more sonatas or something. being, I'm
I
making a joke,
wish.
I hope. But okay, we're going to have to see now. Was that so painful? No, not at
Oh,
all.
no, no, it was fun actually.
Good. I have had, we're done. We're going to call it an evening, a beautiful interview. Very funny. A person bubbling with personality. I'm not just, shooting it out my mouth. You just generate energy and happiness. That's, as I mentioned to you earlier, this happiness.
Thank you.
You have a tremendous happy
I
attitude.
am very happy. I am very happy lately. Very happy.
Good. Ukrainian-American pianist Sophia Agranovich, what a pleasure speaking with you. And we're talking about the 2018 Centaur release. All that's going to be up. Your interview with me is going to be up. I can't wait to get it up at performingartsreview.net. I'm going to write a review of the CD and we have videos, all kinds of good stuff, pictures, all kinds of things. So at performingartsreview.net, the CD is piano music of Frederick Chopin and Franz Liszt. One of the most fascinating, interesting, and maybe even kind of more or less seldom heard assemblages of programming by these two composers. In other words, a CD that pianists need to pick up. Hello, paying attention out there? Pick up this CD, okay? And I'll put all that information out for it. Sophia, many, many thanks. Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Great
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.